The early morning of December 11th, 2025, began like any other in occupied Sevastopol. A thin mist hung over the bay, softening the sharp outlines of Russian warships moored at the naval piers. The city was still asleep, with only the hum of generators and the distant cry of gulls breaking the pre-dawn silence. For the soldiers stationed at the numerous air defense posts scattered across the Crimean peninsula, it was the final quiet hour of a long night watch. They felt secure, protected by layers of advanced radar, missile systems, and electronic jammers. Their equipment was meant to create an impenetrable shield, a fortress that no enemy could breach. On the radar screens, the world was a familiar pattern of green and black. The usual ground clutter, caused by waves on the Black Sea and the rolling hills of Crimea, painted a noisy but normal picture. Operators, sipping warm coffee to stay awake, scanned their displays out of habit more than expectation. They were confident that any threat, be it a missile, a jet, or a large drone, would instantly appear as a bright, flashing icon. The systems were designed to detect fast-hot and high-flying targets. The idea of a small, slow, and cold object creeping just above the ground was not a scenario they trained for every day. This sense of security was the first defense Ukraine had to defeat. The Russian military in Crimea had grown accustomed to a certain type of warfare. Their expensive and powerful systems, like the S-400, were legends of air defense, but they were built to stop Cold War-era threats. The soldiers trusted the technology completely. They believed their positions were perfectly mapped, their missile ranges perfectly calculated, and their electronic eyes all-seeing. They could not imagine that an attack was already underway, carried not by a massive bomber, but by a handful of small, intelligent machines flying just meters above the waves. The city of Sevastopol, the jewel of the Black Sea Fleet, was a symbol of Russian power. Its deep water port hosted some of the most important ships in the Russian Navy. Its airfields were home to advanced fighter jets and helicopters. Protecting this prize was a top priority. Dozens of systems, from long-range radar to shoulder-fired missiles, formed a dense network of defense. But on this particular morning, that network had a blind spot. The threat was not coming from the sky above, but from the shadows below, where technology and human carelessness had created a hidden path straight to the heart of the fortress. Far from the quiet bay, in a secret bunker deep inside Ukrainian-controlled territory, 6 operators sat in front of their screens. Their faces were illuminated by the greenish glow of video feeds. Each operator was flying a Beaver Strike drone, a long-range unmanned aircraft designed for precision missions. The drones had been launched hours earlier, flying a long looping path over the Black Sea to avoid early detection. Now, they were approaching their target. Their mission was audacious, to punch a hole in one of the most heavily defended areas on the planet. The 6 drones were not just machines. They were the remote eyes, ears, and hands of their pilots. The drones themselves were marvels of simple but effective engineering. Made mostly of carbon fiber, they were lightweight and had a very low radar signature. Their small electric motors were quiet and produced very little heat, making them almost invisible to infrared sensors. They flew low, just 30 meters above the churning sea, using the curvature of the Earth and the clutter on radar screens as their camouflage. Their goal was not just to destroy targets, but to survive a gauntlet of defenses that, on paper, should have made their mission impossible. Each drone carried a specialized warhead, tailored for a specific target. The plan was a masterclass in modern warfare, relying on intelligence, timing, and technological tricks. The operators had studied the Russian defenses for months. They knew the location of every radar dish, every missile launcher, and every known dead zone in the coverage. Their flight path was not a straight line but a complex, winding route designed to exploit every tiny gap. They would have to fly through narrow corridors where different air defense systems failed to overlap, a task that required perfect navigation and split-second timing. The entire attack, from first contact to final impact, was scheduled to last only 15 minutes. As the coastline of Crimea appeared on their screens, the operators' hearts began to beat faster. The first phase of the mission was complete. The drones had arrived undetected, but now, the most dangerous part was about to begin. They were entering the range of Russia's powerful electronic warfare system. The operators knew that in the next few moments, their screens could go black, their controls could become useless, and their drones could be lost to the digital void. They prepared for the first move in a deadly game of cat and mouse, a battle that would be fought with signals and software before any missile was ever fired. The attack began not with a bang, but with a crackle of static. Suddenly, the operators' screens flickered. The clear video feed from the drones degraded into a snowy, almost unreadable image. The signal strength indicator, which had been a healthy -70 dBm, plummeted to a critical -110 dBm. This was the work of a Russian Kasuka-4, a powerful electronic warfare vehicle designed to jam enemy communications and radar. For 3 terrifying seconds, the operators were flying blind. At the drone speed of 95 kilometers per hour, 3 seconds of lost control meant they had traveled 80 meters without seeing where they were going. But the Ukrainian team was prepared for this. The moment the jamming started, the drone's autonomous systems kicked in, activating a pre-programmed countermeasure. The drones began frequency hopping. Instead of transmitting on a single frequency, their radios started jumping between 40 different channels, switching every 25 milliseconds. The Russian Kasuka 4 system needed about 50 milliseconds to detect a signal and jam it. By hopping faster than the jammer could react, the drones stayed one step ahead. The connection was not perfect, but it was enough to prevent a total loss of control. Even with frequency hopping, the video feed remained choppy and unreliable. The operators needed a clearer picture to navigate the final treacherous approach. They initiated a burn-through maneuver. For 2 seconds, they instructed the drones to focus all their transmission power onto a single targeted frequency. This massive burst of energy overwhelmed the Russian jamming, like shouting to be heard in a noisy room. The video feed cleared up, becoming grainy but usable. It was a risky move. The powerful transmission could help the Russians pinpoint the drone's location, but it was a risk they had to take. The battle of signals was won. The drone operators had regained control and could see their path forward. They had passed the first test, proving that clever software could defeat powerful hardware. The Kasuka 4 system, designed to create a silent bubble of electronic death, had been outsmarted by the drone's rapid thinking and the operator's bold tactics. However, this small victory came at a cost. The burn-through maneuver had alerted other systems. The drones were no longer invisible ghosts. They were now blips on the screen, and the next layer of defense, the missile systems, was waking up. With their electronic camouflage gone, the drones now had to face the Tor M2 air defense system. At first, the Tor operators did not see them. The drones were still flying at 30 meters, hidden in the ground clutter on the radar display. Frustrated, one Russian operator switched his system to moving target indicator mode. This setting cleverly filters out slow-moving objects, like birds or ground vehicles, by ignoring anything traveling under 40 kilometers per hour. The Ukrainian operators, anticipating this exact move, immediately slowed their drones down to 35 kilometers per hour. On the Tor's screen, the 6 targets simply vanished. This trick bought them precious time, but it could not last. Ahead of them was a set of power lines dangling at a height of 25 meters. To avoid crashing, the lead drone had to climb. For just 3 seconds, it ascended to 60 meters. That was all the Tor system needed. Now clearly visible above the ground clutter, the drone was instantly detected at a range of 2.4 kilometers. An alert blared in the Russian command vehicle, and with a deafening roar, a 9M338 missile shot into the sky, accelerating to over twice the speed of sound. It was streaking directly toward the drone. The Ukrainian operator did not panic. He had trained for this moment. As the missile closed in, he executed a daring maneuver. He pushed the control stick forward, sending the drone into a steep dive. The small aircraft plunged from 60 meters down to just 20 meters above the ground. The Russian 9M338 missile is a sophisticated weapon, but it has a crucial limitation. Its proximity fuse, which detonates the warhead when it gets close to a target, cannot arm itself at altitudes below 15 meters. Flying just above this threshold, the drone was effectively safe. The missile, unable to detonate, screamed past its target and self-destructed harmlessly in the distance. The drones were not out of danger yet. They were now flying between 2 separate Tor batteries. The operators used another known weakness. Each Tor missile needs to travel about 1.5 kilometers from its launcher before its warhead is armed and ready. This creates a dead zone in a circle around the launcher. The flight path was planned to pass directly through a small area where the dead zones of the 2 Tor batteries overlapped. For 10 seconds, the drones flew in a perfectly straight line through this 1.4 kilometer wide safe corridor. They had threaded the needle, surviving a threat that should have annihilated them. But a more formidable enemy was waiting. After surviving the Tor systems, the remaining drones flew directly into the engagement zone of a Pantsir S-1. This fearsome weapon is a combined missile and cannon system, designed to be the last line of defense against air attacks. At a range of 2.2 kilometers, the Pantsir's operator fired 2 57 E-6E missiles. These weapons are incredibly fast, traveling at Mach 3, and are guided by both radio commands and an infrared seeker that homes in on the heat of a target's engine. However, the Pantsir was designed to shoot down jets and helicopters, whose engines burn at over 600 degrees Celsius. The Ukrainian Beaver drones, powered by small electric motors, had a heat signature of only 40 degrees Celsius. The Pantsir's infrared seekers struggled to get a clear lock on such a cold target. One missile flew wide, completely missing its drone. The other missile came closer. Its proximity fuse was supposed to detonate when it detected the metal body of an aircraft, but the Beaver's hull was made of carbon fiber, a material that is largely invisible to this type of fuse. The missile passed within meters of the drone without exploding. However, the Pantsir's missiles still scored 2 kills through direct commands from the operator, and 2 of the 6 drones were destroyed in fiery explosions. With 4 drones left, the Pantsir operator switched to his backup weapon. 2 30mm autocannons capable of firing a terrifying 5,000 rounds per minute. A wall of tracer fire filled the air, but these guns also had a weakness. The Pantsir's targeting computer needed 1.5 seconds of stable flight from a target to calculate a firing solution, predicting where the target will be and aiming the guns accordingly. The Ukrainian operators knew this. They made their drones change direction unpredictably every 1.5 seconds, making it impossible for the computer to lock on. A stream of cannon shells passed harmlessly behind them. The drones were now just 500 meters from the Pantsir, too close for the missiles to be used safely. The cannons were still firing wildly. The operators used one final trick to escape. They commanded their drones to drop to an altitude of just 10 meters. The Pantsir's powerful cannons have a physical limitation. They cannot go lower than -5 degrees. At such a close range, an altitude of 10 meters put the drones below the gun's depression limit. They had slipped into the Pantsir's final blind spot. The 4 surviving drones were now past the main air defense belt and closing in on their targets. Having slipped past the heavy missile and cannon systems, the 4 remaining drones faced one final obstacle. Scattered in defensive positions near the high-value targets were small teams of Russian soldiers armed with man-pads, man-portable air defense systems. These shoulder-fired missiles, like the Igla, are designed to be a simple and effective way for infantry to shoot down low-flying aircraft, especially helicopters. 3 soldiers saw the drones approaching and quickly raised their launchers, attempting to get a lock. The familiar, distinct tone of the Seeker, searching for a heat source, filled their ears. However, the Igla missile's Seeker is designed to lock onto the intense heat of a helicopter's exhaust, which can be around 300 degrees Celsius. Just like the Pantsir's missiles, the Igla's guidance system was almost blind to the drone's cool 40-degree electric motors. The soldiers aimed their launchers, waiting for the high-pitched lock-on sound that would tell them the missile was ready to fire. That sound never came. The Seeker could not distinguish the drone's faint heat signature from the background warmth of the ground and sea. 2 of the soldiers lowered their weapons in frustration, unable to engage the targets. One soldier, perhaps out of desperation or protocol, decided to fire anyway. He used the missile's less precise optical sight to aim and pulled the trigger. The Igla missile shot from its tube with a whoosh, leaving a trail of smoke as it streaked toward the drone. But without a proper heat lock, the missile was flying blind. It chased a phantom heat signature, likely a small pocket of warm air caused by a temperature inversion over the water. The missile flew erratically for a few seconds before plunging harmlessly into Sevastopol Bay. The last line of physical defense had failed. The path was unclear. The 4 surviving drones had successfully navigated the deadly maze of electronic jamming, long-range missiles, rapid-fire cannons, and shoulder-fire weapons. They had achieved this not through brute force, but through intelligence, clever tactics, and the exploitation of every known weakness in the Russian defense network. Each layer of the supposedly impenetrable shield had been peeled back, one by one. The operators and the distant vehicle took it upward. It was time to take the mission. The final, destructive phase of the attack was about to begin. At exactly 6:15 local time, just 15 minutes after the attack began, the 4 surviving drones reached their designated targets. The first drone, carrying a shaped charge, dove towards a P-18 Terek long-range radar. Upon impact, the charge detonated, creating a hypersonic jet of molten copper that sliced through the radar's electronics like a hot knife through butter. A second drone slammed into a nearby Nebo-U surveillance radar, another key piece of the early warning system. In an instant, 2 of the most important eyes watching over Crimea went dark, creating a massive new blind spot in Russia's air defense network. A third drone, which had been damaged by shrapnel from a Pantsir missile, limped towards its target, a 96 L6E engagement radar. This radar was the brain of a powerful S-400 battery, responsible for guiding its missiles to their targets. The damaged drone crashed into the delicate radar array, disabling it completely. The mighty S-400 battery, one of the most feared air defense systems in the world, was now blind and useless. The 4th and final drone flew over the radar sites and headed for the naval pier. It dove low over the water and struck a VK-16 fast assault boat, detonating its warhead just below the waterline and crippling the vessel. The attack was over. In the span of a quarter of an hour, 6 small drones had achieved what a squadron of fighter jets might have failed to do. They had systematically dismantled key components of Sevastopol's layered air defense system and damaged a naval asset. The cost for Ukraine was 2 Beaver drones. The cost for Russia was far greater. 3 critical radar systems destroyed, an S-400 battery blinded, a fast assault boat crippled, and most importantly, the shattering of their illusion of safety. The attack proved that no place was truly safe from Ukraine's evolving drone capabilities. For the Russian military in Crimea, the daring raid was a humiliating wake-up call. It demonstrated that their expensive, top-of-the-line systems had critical vulnerabilities that could be exploited by cheaper, smarter technology. The successful strike forced the Black Sea Fleet to reconsider the safety of its most valuable warships in Sevastopol, accelerating their relocation to ports further east. More than just a military victory, the raid was a powerful message. It showed the world that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a combination of clever strategy, technological innovation, and sheer audacity could change the rules of modern warfare.